Welcome to lecture number 61 of the series Unreal 5 for Archviz, and in this lecture, we'll learn how we can add cameras into our scene. We'll also learn a few camera settings, and then we'll learn how we can animate camera and other objects by using Unreal Engine's level sequence. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, let me show you how you can add a camera in your scene. To add a camera in your scene, what you can do is, you can open this burger menu and simply select this camera actor. Let's move away. And now we have this camera in our scene. Okay, we can see the view of this camera in here, but if you want to see this view on the bigger screen, what you can do is you can simply press right mouse button and select this option, and now we have the view of that camera on the bigger screen. We can move this camera just like we used to move around in our scene in the viewport. Let's adjust the view. Now if I'll go into the details panel by selecting this camera actor, here we have a lot of camera settings. Okay, let's discuss a few important settings. First, in here we have film back. This actually controls the sensor width and sensor height of the camera. Here we have some presets. Let's say if I want to select this one, 16:9 DSLR, you can see that now we have a much wider lens. Similarly, if you want even wider lens, you can choose IMAX 70mm. I mostly keep this setting at the default, but in case if you want to use a wider lens, you can choose the DSLR. Okay, yeah. You can also adjust the sensor width and sensor height on your own. Let's say if you want to have a wider view, you can increase the sensor width, and similarly you can also control the sensor height as well. Okay, yeah, let's keep this at the default setting. Next, in here we have lens settings. By tweaking this setting, we can adjust the focal length of the camera. Here we have some presets. Let's say if we want a 30mm focal length, we can select this preset. Similarly, if we want a 55mm focal length, you can select 55mm. I usually keep this number as it is and adjust the focal length from here. Okay, next, in here we have focus settings. Here we can control the focus of our camera. Let's say if the focus method is set to disable, we'll no longer have any sort of focus in our camera. Okay, but if I'll change this setting to, let's say, manual, and select this area for instance, now you can see that this object is in focus and the rest of the area is out of focus. Okay, now if I'll check this box, draw debug focus plane, you'll see that we'll have a 2D focus plane in our scene. This will actually help us to know which areas are out of focus and which areas are in focus. Okay, let's say if I adjust this plane and place it over this jar, you can see that this area is now in focus and rest of the area is out of focus. Okay, but if I'll move this away and place it somewhere around here, you can see that now this area is in focus and the rest of the area is out of focus. So this plane helps us to know that which areas are in focus or out of focus. Okay, next, in here we have focal length. We can tweak this number to adjust the focal length of the scene. Somewhere around 25 is actually a good starting number for the interiors, but this completely depends on you how much area you want to show with your camera. Okay, let's keep this as 30 or 35, maybe 50. And let me adjust the focus. Next, in here we have current aperture. For this, let me adjust the camera view. By tweaking this number, we can actually control the depth of field. If I'll increase this number, you'll see that we'll have comparatively sharper results in the areas that are out of focus. Okay, but if I'll decrease this number, you'll see that the areas that are out of focus are now much blurrier. But one little problem that we have in here is that if I'll increase this aperture, we can see a decrease in the exposure. But if I'll decrease my aperture value, we can see an increase in exposure, which is also affecting our depth of field. So for that, what I'll do is I'll search for exposure in this camera setting, and I'll check these two boxes. Make sure metering mode is set to auto exposure histogram. Okay, let's go back into the aperture settings. And now if I'll increase this value, you can see that the areas that are out of focus will have comparatively sharper results. And if I'll decrease this value, you can see that the areas that are out of focus are now much blurrier. And now we'll no longer have any sort of increase or decrease in exposure by tweaking this aperture value. Okay. One more thing that I want you to know is that, let me search for exposure. And you need to keep one thing in mind, that this exposure adjustment is only limited to this particular camera. Okay. If I'll move out of this camera view, you can see that we don't have that exposure in here. If I'll increase this value, you can see the increase in exposure in this camera, but it does not have any sort of impact in our scene. Okay. Let's open this camera view. And similarly, we have many other settings that we can also tweak in the post-process volume. But if you'll tweak those settings in the post-process volume, it will have a global impact. But if you'll adjust these settings in the camera, they will not have any sort of impact outside that camera view. Okay. Yeah. Let's change the focus method to disable. And let me save everything. Let's now learn how we can animate this camera by using Unreal Engine's level sequence. Okay. For that, I'll go into the content folder and I'll create a new folder. I'll rename this as level underscore sequence. Let's open this folder, and to add a level sequence, I'll go into cinematics and I'll select level sequence. I'll rename this as 1. Let's open this level sequence. And now as you can see that we have a timeline and a playhead that we can use to animate. Okay. Let's say if I want to animate this camera, what I'll do is I'll simply drag this camera and drop it in here. Let me enlarge this window and let's move to frame number 0. You can also adjust the frame number by using your arrow keys. And let's say I want to animate the camera location on y-axis. What I'll do is I'll simply add a keyframe at frame number 0 and I'll move to frame number 150. Let's move this camera and maybe place it here. It will automatically add a keyframe. And let's now play this animation by pressing spacebar on the keyboard. Now you can see that we have successfully animated this camera on y-axis. Let's play it again. You may have noticed that the speed of the camera is not constant. It is actually slow in the beginning, then it gradually speeds up, and then it slows down again. But if I select these two keyframes and set the keyframe interpolation to linear, now you can see that the speed of the camera is constant throughout the animation. Okay. Similarly, you can also create a rotation animation. Let's move out of this camera and let's go into the bedroom. Let me increase the camera speed and hide the foliage actor so that we can have some more FPS. Let's adjust the view. Let's add another camera. You can also choose this one if you want, but I'll choose this one because this one has some extra settings that are useful. Okay. Let's select this option to pilot this camera and let's create another level sequence. I'll rename this as 2. I'm gonna select this camera, drag it and drop it in here. Let me adjust the window. And let's say if I want to adjust the rotation, what I can do is, let me maybe adjust it somewhere around here. Let's increase the focal length to 20 or maybe 25. And let me adjust the angle. Yeah, let's rotate it like that. Yeah, I think this is okay. Let's disable the focus and let me increase the exposure. I'm gonna change this to manual because we're not gonna use the camera focus, okay? Let's add a keyframe at frame number 0. I'll move to frame number 150. And let's rotate this on Z-axis like that. Let me adjust and place it here. And now if I'll play this animation, you can see that we have a rotation animation for this camera, okay? Similarly, let's move out of this camera view and let's go into the kitchen. Let's say I want to create an animation in which I want my camera to rotate around this basket. So for that, what I'll do is I'll add a basic actor and place it in the middle. Maybe place it right here. Okay. And now what I'll do is I'll add another camera. Let's pilot this camera. I'll increase the focal length to, let's say, 30. Let's disable the camera focus and I'll adjust the camera position. Let me bring down the camera speed. I think this is okay. Yeah. Let's add a level sequence. I'll rename this as 3. And now what I'll do is I'll drag this camera and place it inside this actor. I'll select both of them. I'll drag them and bring them in here. I'll select this actor and bring in a transform parameter. And I'll open rotation parameter. Let's add a keyframe. I'll move to frame number 150. Let's rotate this actor on Z-axis, maybe like that. Okay. And let's play this animation. Yeah, now you can see that our camera is rotating around this fruit basket. Okay. Let me increase the work area. I'll increase this to, let's say, 300. And I can drag this slider to adjust the view of my work area. Okay. Let's move this keyframe to maybe 240. Let's keep it at 239 and let's increase the range. Let's play this animation. Now you can see that comparatively we have a much slower animation. Okay. I'll select these two keyframes and change the keyframe interpolation to linear. Let's save everything. Now let's say if I want to add a camera shake animation. For that, what I'll do is I'll go into the content browser and let's create a blueprint. I'll search for camera shake. Okay, and I'll select this one, camera shake base. Okay, I'll rename this as camera shake. Okay, I'll open this blueprint. Let me enlarge this window. We're not going to do anything in the event graph. We just need this details parameter. Okay, I'll change the shake pattern to purling noise, and down here we have some settings for the location and the rotation of the camera shake. Let's compile this blueprint. Let's place it here. Okay, I'll go into sequencer. I'll select this camera actor and I'll add this camera shake blueprint. Right now it is only confined to 1 second, but if I'll change this duration number to 0 and compile this blueprint, now we'll have this camera shake as long as we want. Okay, let's drag this and increase this to 239, and let's play this animation. Now you can see that we have a very nice camera shake in our scene. If I'll go into the pitch settings and decrease this number to 0 and increase this number to, let's say, 5. Let's change this to 1 and compile this blueprint and play this animation. You can see that we have a much bigger vertical movement of camera. But let's say if I'll decrease this number to 0 and increase this to 5 and play this animation, you can see that now we have this horizontal movement of camera. Let's move to frame number 1, and if I'll increase the roll value to 5 and play this animation, you can see a different movement of camera. Okay, let's change this number to 0.4 maybe, and I'll do the same thing for the location values. Let's compile this blueprint and let's play this level. Now you can see that we have a much better natural movement. Okay, let's move out of this camera and close this window. I'll save everything. Just like we animated this camera, we can also animate the other objects. Let's move and place the camera somewhere around here. And what I'll do is I'll add another camera. Let's pilot this camera. And what I'll do is let me increase the focal length to, let's say, 20. Yeah, I think 20 is fine. And let's add a level sequence. I'll rename this as 4. Let's open the sequence. And what I'll do is I'll drag this camera and place it in here. I'll add a location keyframe. And let's move this on y-axis. and maybe place it here. Okay, I don't need the Z and X keyframe, so I'll simply delete it. Yeah, I think this is okay. Let's say I want to open or slide this window on X-axis before I enter this room. So for that, what I'll do is I'll select this glass and let me remove these filters. And from the outliner, I'll drag this actor and drop it in here. And now what I'll do is in the transform settings, let's say at frame number 60, I'll add a location keyframe on X-axis, and at frame number 79 or 80, I'll move this glass and place it maybe here. Okay. Similarly, I'll select this frame, I'll drag this actor and drop it in here. I'll go into the transform settings. I'll select and copy these keyframes, and at frame number 60, I'll simply press Ctrl V to paste those keyframes in here. Now, if I'll play this animation, you'll see that the glass window will slide on X-axis before I entered this room. Okay. Similarly, you can also adjust the artificial lights. Let's say, let me close these parameters. Yeah. Let's move out of this camera. I'll select these artificial lights. For now, I'm just selecting the spotlights. And what I'll do is, I'll drag these spotlights and bring them in here. I'll select one of them. And what I'll do is, let me select this camera. Okay. And at frame number, let's say 80, I'm gonna select the spotlight and I'm gonna animate the light intensity. Let's add a keyframe. And at frame number, let me select this camera. Yeah, I think at frame number 85, I'll increase this intensity to, let's say, 2500. Now I'll copy these keyframes by pressing Ctrl C, and I'll select the intensity component of other spotlights. Okay. I'll move to frame number 80. Oh, I think I mistakenly unselected them. Let's select the light intensity component by pressing Ctrl on the keyboard. And I'll simply press Ctrl V on the keyboard to paste those keyframes. Let's pilot this camera. And now when I'll play this animation, you can see the increase in light intensity before I entered this room. Okay. Yeah. Similarly, we have other settings, like we can adjust the frames per second for the animation. Let's say we want this animation to run at 60 frames per second. I can simply select 60 FPS. I can also type in custom frames per second. Similarly, here we have some render settings, which we will discuss in the next video. Okay. So yes, that's it for this lecture. And in the next lecture, we'll learn how we can render our scene. So yes, I'll see you guys in the next one.